You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. This week, my guest is Furman University head men's basketball coach Bob Richey. In 6 seasons as head coach at Furman, Bob has amassed a 139-54 overall record and a .720 winning percentage, which ranks in the top 15 among active Division I head coaches. Furman now joins Duke, Gonzaga, Houston, Kansas, St. Mary's, and Southern California as the only NCAA Division I programs with 22 or more wins in at least 6 of the past 7 seasons. This past season, Bob led Furman to a program record 28 wins, a SoCon regular season title, and SoCon tournament championship. And in March, Bob took Furman to its first NCAA tournament in 43 years, and the team upset 4th-ranked University of Virginia in the first round. It was one of the most thrilling and remarkable moments in NCAA tournament history. Bob and I recently caught up to explore his career and the success secrets powering Furman's remarkable run of success. The conversation you are about to hear is about far more than basketball. It's a deeply personal conversation about life, success, and as Bob says, the importance of building something that matters. Bob shared timeless lessons on how to turn adversity into good, operate at what he calls the intersection of joy and urgency, and how to step back and enjoy life's big moments. I hope this conversation can be a stepping stone for all of us on the road to each becoming the best version of ourselves. This episode is jam-packed, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Bob Richey. I'm curious, Coach, now that you've had a few months to let everything settle in, have you had a chance to reflect and think maybe about what some of the things were that contributed to that extraordinary run last season?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of time. I mean, obviously, when you get done in our world, these things become pretty year-round. And so it's quickly about what's next. And, I think it's one thing that I've tried to fight a little bit with my personality and really trying to find some time to reflect on it. And it's been a process. I mean, this has been, you look back 7-8 years ago, I think the program was 342 out of 350 some odd teams. And we were basically a nobody, and just kind of had to figure out a way, like, how we're going to build this. And, I was an assistant here, and what's going to work here? How are we going to win here? What type of people are going to win here? And, it was just slowly, then we started kind of getting to an upstart and looking like, oh man, they're a little bit better, and they're in double digit wins. And then we started winning. And I think the last, we've won 20 games. I take out the COVID year, 6 years. Then all of a sudden it's like, man, they're close. And then this year was, that progression of winning, contender, champion. We were able to finally, quote unquote, break through. And, I think it was just the culmination of the whole process. And, if you know a little bit about what we went through last year, of being right there to go to the first NCAA tournament in 42 years. And we lose at the buzzer on a 35-foot shot. And then really, to be honest with you, I think the more you study success, there's always these moments where it's like you have these crucible moments where you have to decide, like, what is your response going to be? And it's never in the easy. And I think the neatest thing about this story is we had a real, like a hard moment. And we had to decide as a program what was going to be our response. And was this going to be an adverse moment that would push us backwards, or was this going to be something that would propel us forward? And not only did it propel us forward, but it got us to a place where your hope was that it could propel you to a championship. It not only got us that, but we ended up winning the game in the tournament.
It's such an amazing story. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Coach. One of the things that I find fascinating about your career is that in the years before your head coaching and the time at Furman, as an assistant, there was a lot of losing seasons, a lot of losses. And I'm curious, a lot of times you see, assistants become head coaches, and because they've been on this recent run of success in the win column, and then they become a head coach, and maybe it's a struggle and an adjustment. In your situation, there was a lot of losing kind of in your assistant roles and a lot of building, and then the opportunity at Furman, where as a head coach, you've had a lot of success. I'm curious, when you have that moment that you referred to last year, where there was a real point of adversity and we could go left, we could go right. Did you draw upon some of those experiences where there were just a lot of turmoil in those early years as an assistant? Were there things that you could draw upon from that period of your career and leverage now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of my career really built my individual philosophy, in terms of a lot of people, I'd hear phrases when I was an assistant. It used to always kind of be like a punch in the stomach. You'd be talking about another assistant and they'd be like, well, man, they've lost everywhere they've been, or, man, this guy just got this job and his other two jobs they've lost. I mean, and it's like, we all get these labels, is he a winner? Is he a loser? But at the end of the day, like, when you don't run the program, you have to do what your job is, and you have to go out there and you have to recruit. You have your part of it, but the responsibility, you're not the ultimate decision maker, like, you're working for a boss. And for me, like, I look back on my career, and 9 out of 11 seasons as an assistant, I was on a losing team, which is pretty wild. But when you look at the losing at Charleston Southern, I mean, we were trajectory up, right? Like, it was when I got there in 2006, I mean, we were really, really bad. And then same thing when I was here at Furman, like, we weren't that good, and we had to build that up. And so you see progressions in both. And I think learning through the losing and then learning through the building, what I was never to be a part of as an assistant was, what does it look like to sustain success, right? What does it look like to try to win 20 games every year, which is really hard. But for me, as I was an assistant, and really even prior to being an assistant, I've always, leadership has been something that I've always just enjoyed. I've enjoyed the study of it. I don't have a ton of hobbies, but I do love to read. I love to watch, like, how do these things work? And over the course of your life, you just realize, like, the best stories are usually a picture of the endurance of hard. And a lot of times we'll never know what life should have looked like or would have looked like, but it just has always been an impression on me, like, how many people stop right before it's about to get really good. And what's the correlation to blessing and pain? And, like, when you go through life, you just see these pictures where we feel like, man, that's bad, and so it's going to end bad. But the longer you live, endurance is something that you just realize could be the biggest separator of all of them. That produces, when you're able to endure, it produces like a perseverance, right? That you're able to just last longer. And I just told the team, the next morning after the buzzer beater, I said, hey, we're either going to turn this pain into purpose, right? Or this pain is going to be something that doesn't go away, and we're going to use this as an inhibitor. And we have to make the decision of what we're going to do with this pain. The pain's not changing, right? Like, the shot's not going to all of a sudden not go in. We don't need to spend any time talking about that. But is this going to be a stepping stone, or is this going to be a stumbling block? And the choice is going to be ours. Man, it's hard to make those decisions in the midst of pain. But I think when you can say, hey, you know what? We're going to try to learn through this. We're going to try to grow through this. We're going to try to build endurance through this. I think it was able to actually help us through this season as well.
The concept of endurance and just continuing to plow forward. I am also amazed, Coach, at how many people stop right before the breakthrough, right? Like, you wonder how many breakthroughs might have happened if people hadn't stopped. I'm reminded of a conversation that I had with a country music songwriter, and he's now written 18 number one hits. And he told me, he said, Andrew, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. And when you think about that, right, it looks to the public like we just flipped a switch one day and now he was writing number one songs. But there was failure, there was doubt, there was all these things that happened, and he just continued to endure and plow forward. I hear some of that in your story. And I'm curious, you talked with the team, you shared your thoughts and perspectives on that moment of kind of heartbreak and adversity. And there were two ways that you can use it. There were things that you can control. There were things that you couldn't control. How did the team respond? Did you know right away that the team might use this for good?
Well, so we lost at the buzzer. For the listeners that didn't see the game, we're playing Chattanooga. They're the 1 seed. We're the 2 seed. Basically, we had a great year. They had a great year. They beat us twice in the regular season, 2 really, really good games. And then we get in this war in the championship. And Furman hadn't been to the NCAA tournament since 1980. And so if we win this game in the championship, we're going to the big dance. And anyway, long story short, the game goes to overtime. We have the ball, tie game, overtime. We're going to get the last shot. We go on our action and we score with 4 seconds left to take the lead. They had started to escort my wife down. Their bench is calling for a timeout. The refs don't hear it. They throw the ball in. It's kind of chaotic. The kid takes a couple dribbles, throws the ball up, and the ball goes in. So dreams right there, right? Like it's right there in your hands and then shattered. And so I went into a locker room. It was the most painful locker room I've ever been in. And just, beyond tears. I mean, it was just agony. I mean, it was just heartbreak. So that night we had to process all that. You had to lead through that. And then the next morning I addressed the team. It was a pretty long address. And it was really like, hey, this is what our response is going to be. And I thought it was critical for them to see a proper response in me. It wasn't necessarily the way I felt in terms of my feeling was still one of hurt, disappointment, and pain. But in my mind, I knew that, hey, this is going to be critical that we make this decision on how we're going to respond. And as I saw them processing as we were talking, you could kind of see it like, okay, we do have a choice here. And I think that's what I told them, and that I thought was the most impactful is I said, the biggest thing that we're going to have to avoid in this time right now is how many people tell us that we deserve to win the game. And I said, we're going to have to acknowledge right now that that's a complete lie. And the quicker that we can accept the shot went in, the better chance that we're going to have to respond, because a lot of time the pain and hard is just not wanting to accept the actual event took place, right? And that's where the why me or how did this happen, or like once you can get to that point where you're just like, hey, you know what, like it happened and I have to accept it. What's the next move? And I think for our guys, I told them, I said, look, we deserve to win for 44 minutes and 56 seconds. But those last 4, like they made a shot that allowed them to have more points than we did. So when you get a text today that says you deserve to win, that's a lie. And, it's funny. We left that team meeting and I thought, man, you know what? A lot of pain in here, but I think they get it. And there was like a resolve that we all kind of had, like, hey, let's go do this. Like, look, we're going to write the end of this story. It's really interesting, Andrew, like you think about movies and you think about books, right? And you think about how Hollywood captivates you, okay? And you compare that through your life of what you think your life's supposed to be. So right now in our world, if you're just talking like, hey, generalizations, how can we avoid as much conflict as we possibly can? And how can we seek as much comfort as we possibly can? And when I have pain and when I have conflict, like that's bad. And then if I can enjoy pleasure and go to the beach and make money and, have this beautiful life that I can throw on social media and convince everybody that everything's great, then that's the dream, right? But when we go to the movie theater or we sit at our house and we watch Netflix, you see this sequence of events that takes place and you see a story that's written based on a conflict, right? And the conflict gets shown quickly. And then all of a sudden you're in the movie and you're kind of halfway through and you see this climax point where you're like, oh man, this is all great. Like this is good stuff's happening. Well, the movie doesn't stop. And what happens at that point where you get to the climax is there's this following action in the movie that like all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like what in the world just happened? Which as a viewer, it just draws you completely in, right? Like at this point, it's like, all right, we're going to watch the rest of it. And then the last part of the movie is the resolution. And what I think is the biggest thing is like in life, when I think about that, like we're okay to deal with conflict as long as we know there's going to be a climax. But the separators in life are usually the ones, can you have a resolute mindset when you go through the following action? Because the following action is like, that's going to be what decides, right? Like what is going on here and what you're saying and what I'm like, they stop because as they go through the following action, they think, well, I already had this conflict. Why am I going through this? Oh man, well, let me just stop. And then you see this unbelievable like if they do stay with it, you see all these books, right? Where like you see all these stories. And so what's interesting is if you go back and pull up our Virginia box score, what I just explained and described to you, if you look on ESPN and you see the winning probability, you'll see that same curve of what I just said. You'll see a conflict, we're down 12. Okay. You'll see a climax. All of a sudden we go zone, we start coming back, and you see this trend line go all the way up. And all of a sudden our winning probability is really high. Well, then we turn the ball over twice in like the last 2 minutes of the game, and you see it on ESPN. You see this sharp line that just drops all the way down. And it's the following action. It's, okay, here we go. We've seen this story before. Furman had a great game. Virginia wins. But then we had that resolute moment. And we had that moment where we hit the shot. And that's what made the whole story. Like, nobody cares that we turned the ball over twice. Nobody cares that we were down 4 with 19 seconds to go, right? When everything felt like it was falling apart. But basically, like, you see that resolute moment take place at the end. You know, I think that's the story of life. And I think had we not had to endure what took place a year ago as a program, I'm not sure we're willing or ready, I guess I should say ready, to be able to deal with what we had to deal with.
I watched that clip a couple times this morning because I knew we were talking today. I watched that clip. You can just see the emotion on your face. You're running over to the team. There was a point where it looked like you were hugging your wife. What are you thinking about in that moment? Are all of these years kind of racing through your mind? Is what happened with Chattanooga racing through your mind? Are you just thinking about how grateful you are to be, you know, at battle with the crew that's around you? Like, what are some of the things that are going through your mind in a moment like that?
There was a lot of emotion for sure. The thing for me at that moment that I really think about is, first, my family. You know, we do this as a unit, and my kids are involved, and my wife, I mean, Jessica, she's unbelievable. And we run this program as a family. They travel to most games, and they're around, and they've been with the highs and they've been with the lows. And, you know, just to have that moment with them was pretty neat. And then really, to be honest with you, like, the joy to see how many Furman people that were there in Orlando, and the week before to see grown people crying of a drought of 43 years that was done. And then 10 days later to be in Orlando. And really, to be honest with you, one of the proudest moments that we had was just to look up and see the representation that the university had there and how many people we had there. And just to see them in a state of just, I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, just to feel like, hey, we were able to give them this moment and that they were able to enjoy this. And that was probably what made me personally the most satisfied, was just to see the joy that everybody associated with the program got out of it. And then, you know, I mean, just you hear about it. You know, I've never been in the NCAA tournament. That was my first experience. I hadn't been there as a player. I was a D2 player. I hadn't been there as a coach. I hadn't been there as an assistant, head coach, nothing. And then all of a sudden, you grew up trying to skip school on the day where you had the Thursday, Friday games, and now we're front and center. One of those stories. I mean, I'll be honest with you, as I sit here and talk about it, it's one of those things that life is still doesn't totally feel real, but just fortunate to be a part of it.
I want to double click into that, Coach. Like you said, it was your first experience at the NCAA tournament. If for the rest of your life, you were watching on TV, like you said, trying to skip school. Were there things that you did to try and ready yourself for that moment? You know, you punch your ticket to the big dance. You've got a team to get situated, a bunch of players that probably have not been to the tournament as well. Did you reach out to other coaches who had more experience with the big dance and get some advice? Did you just stick to your typical approach? Talk about that for a moment.
Well, both. You know, I did talk to a bunch of people that had been. One of the kind of the motto that this team really developed through the year that I'm sure you've seen a little bit, but just this concept of understanding how that, like, joy is not separate of urgency, and that the two can kind of coexist. And we're at our best when we're operating within joy and urgency. And that just because we're going to have joy does not mean we're going to lack urgency, or just because we're going to be urgent does not mean we're going to be absent of joy. And we really talked about a lot as a team. There was a lot of pressure going into the year, and we returned 2 all-conference players, and we were preseason number 1. And, you know, man, we're going to the Charleston Classic, and like we had a crew follow us around for this documentary all year. And I felt like you could feel in the year, especially in the non-conference, like this pressure of like, hey, you have to win every single game. And our guys were working really hard. You could tell they cared. You could tell they wanted to win. But I started to kind of feel like, man, like I never want our program winning to feel like a relief. I want there to be a joy, like in terms of what we do. And so we lost a game early in conference play at Western Carolina. And we came into film and they thought I was going to show all these defensive clips. And I ended up showing 10 clips on just our energy, just our countenance and our presentation, and not knowing if we were winning or losing. I even showed some clips when we were up and like, just look at us. And we just look joyless. We look like we're not enjoying this. We started to really turn it, and we started to just say, look, we want these two things to really coexist. And so that became our deal. Like we ended up winning 15-16 in the year. And basically when we were talking about it, it was one of those situations where when we got to the end of the year and we won the SoCon tournament, I just decided, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to change that up now. Okay. And so I kept calling these coaches, and it was funny. And like coaches, we love to exaggerate. Okay. So like, hey, what do you do Sunday night after the selection show? I mean, we stay up all night and watch film. It's like, no, you don't. But that's what we tell everybody, right? So everybody's like, oh, Sunday's a grind. Sunday's a grind. Well, for us, like we get to Sunday and there hadn't been a selection show in 43 years. And so we're in the conference room and it's getting, 8:30. And I look at the staff. I'm like, guys, I'm not sitting in here all night. We're going to the tournament. This has been an unbelievable run. Like, we've got this really good barbecue spot. I said, let's just go to Lewis and let's celebrate. Like, this is a moment, and so we did. Like, we were just, and they kind of looked at me like, is this guy for real? Like, what is going on? And I'm like, hey, the film's there. Like, we know Virginia. We know what we're going to have to deal with. We don't play till Thursday. Like, we'll watch film, but let's go enjoy this. And so staff goes, we're telling all these stories. And so we kind of kept that same message of like, we're all going to the tournament. We've all never been. It's been 43 years. The last thing we want to do is zap the energy from this and act like we got to be so serious and act like, and so it was like, but man, we got a really hard opponent and we're going to have to be really, really dialed in. And I thought our team did a great job with that. When we practiced, we practiced. When we watch film, we watch film. But when we were in the hotel, man, the guys were smiling, guys were having a good time, and we were trying to enjoy this and went to media, went to the arena, and some people may put their phones up. I'm like, hey, man, like, take pictures, like, enjoy this. And I thought it really helped when we got to the game of just like knowing that we had to really make sure that we didn't make this feel like a pressure cooker and just to really go out there and be free. And I think that's why we were able to be down 12 and have the ability emotionally and mentally to be able to make a comeback on a team of that magnitude.
I love that. I mean, just selection show, let's go get barbecue. They must have loved it at Lewis. You all, the Furman basketball team rolls in after checking punching their ticket to the big dance for the first time in 43 years. Coach, you recently gave the commencement address at your alma mater. You said a couple things that I really found interesting that I think kind of relate to what you just said. One of the things you said was you talked about not playing it safe with your career, with anything, right? And that was some advice that you were giving to new graduates. If you tie it back to what you were saying about joy, do you think when you lose and kind of zap the joy and the positive energy from something, does that make you more likely to play it safe? Like if there's this loose and this fun, this vibrancy around the program, around a game, are you not playing it safe? Are you playing it more aggressively with more conviction?
Yeah, I think when you get in those moments, fear can really start to be involved in your decision making. And I do think this is, I don't know if there's scientific evidence to prove this or not. This is just one of my strong beliefs. Like, we all have this greater fear of losing than we do this greater joy of winning, right? Like, we're so scared to lose things. We're scared to lose money. We're scared to lose our job. We're scared of, like, losing is such a bigger negative emotion than the thrill of winning. And to me, I feel like the more I can try to change that balance a little bit to where I can live in a space of gratitude because, right, when you're looking at this thing from a lens of what can I lose as opposed to what can I potentially gain, I think that puts you in a safe spot, right? We're outside in the yard when we're 10 years old playing tag, right? Well, when it got a little bit crazy, what'd you do? You tried to find base. Well, you're not going to win the game standing on base, but you're safe at the moment. And, I think it's one of those situations. I think in life, there's no do-overs. Like, we're all going to get to the end of this journey at some point. You're going to look back. And I think you have to be at a managed, calculated risk. I think you have to be able to do that. You have to understand your gifts. You got to understand that we're all created with gifts, and we're all, in some part, we have to understand there's a responsibility to those gifts. But I think right now, when you just kind of play safe and you kind of try to figure out what's accepted and, what's going to be validated, man, like I feel like we're just going to look back on the end of it and be like, man, yeah, we survived it. But like, did we really go for something great? That was my challenge to them, that I think right now you see a lot of, this is a whole nother topic, but you see a lot of validation, right? Like, I want to be accepted and I want to create an image. I want to do it through a means, whether it be social media or whatever, that, hey, everything's great. And we're almost living in this idea of like approval. Like, I need to be approved. And to me, like, that's such a depressing way of looking at life, right? Like, I want to look at it of, hey, God created me with a set of gifts that I can go out there and do something in this world that could potentially have an impact, that I could be a part of something that's larger than me, that lasts longer than me. But man, I got to be willing to go for gold. Like, I got to be willing to say, hey, you know what? Like, we're going to go try to do something, not because of me, right? We're going to go try to do something that involves us. In those two words, right? Can I find something that's larger than myself that I can pour myself into? And can I find something that will last longer than my life? And I think when you can operate in those spaces, what you have to first sign up for, because when everybody hears that sounds great. But then the next part of it is, okay, but here's the difference though. Am I going to be a getter or am I going to be a builder? Right? Because if it's all about what I can get, I'm not going to be a part of something larger and then last longer than me. But if I can be willing to be a part of something that builds, creates, well, now all of a sudden that's not me. That's the humility part, right? And I think that's what I was trying to challenge those graduates with.
Where do you think the tremendous drive and work ethic that motivates you, where do you think that comes from? Have you thought about that, Coach?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. This whole argument, nature versus nurture, I've spent a lot of my life thinking about that. I probably land on both in some ways. I do think, you look at my bloodlines, my dad was a doctor. I've got some very successful people in my lineage in terms of career-wise. And I think there is a certain drive that you're kind of born with in some ways. But I think that drive can be escalated or de-escalated based on decisions, based on my personal philosophy and what I see this life. Like, I think as you go through, like, that drive can go in a bunch of different directions. And I think the nurture part of it is, where does that drive become channeled to, right? And for me, I think where I've been able to grow, the more I live, I'm 40 years old now. I was, as a child, it was something where, like, I was in a family that had very high standards. We're going to make straight A's. We're going to, you're going to be a great citizen. You're going to read, you're going to compete, you're going to go to church, you're going to do the things that are going to represent this family name well. And, you look back on that and you're like, man, like that, that was a demanding childhood. But at the same time, I saw my father wake up at 5 a.m. every day. I saw my father run a practice as a physician where he's seeing 40 patients a day and he's extremely committed to his field. But at the same time was also, a present father. And you look back and you kind of go through it and you still get back to this point of like, hey, what's the purpose of all this, right? Like, I think every person kind of gets in that deal. And I was always, we talked about books before the show. I used to not like to read at all. And in fact, I was a pretty good student, but could not stand to read all the way through high school. And in college, I picked up 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was like the first book that I picked up and I read, and I was like, you know what? Like, I kind of like this. This is kind of interesting. And I remember it was like, and this was more when a lot of that literature was more geared towards, hey, what's your purpose statement? You always would hear that. I would get out to start writing, and like I never felt like I really had anything good. Like I was a math and science guy. I was not like a literature English guy. And I would just kind of stop. I would just be like, you know what? I don't feel like come up with 3 sentences. I can't find anything that kind of captures all this. And it wasn't until a year ago, we have a staff retreat, and we were at the lake with the staff. And this was after we had lost in the tournament. And I just told the staff, I said, look, I think us defining our purpose as a program staff and even individually is going to be critical if we're able to do what we want to go do. And I said, before we meet tomorrow, we had some time in the lake and I gave them some free time. I said, I want everybody to come up with just a short version of what they feel like their purpose statement is. And man, what was interesting when I went through that, I did it for the staff, but it was like midnight and I couldn't figure out what mine was. And I was just up and I was just like, again, like kind of stuck, like not feeling like it had captured everything. And it was about 1 a.m. in the morning. And I finally just wrote something down, and it just basically like, hey, I want to be a builder, and I want it to be something that matters. And like, I couldn't quite get past any of that. And I thought, you know what? That's enough right there. Like, I just want to be a part of building something that matters, period. And like, it's 1 o'clock and it's like this epiphany. It's like, okay, now we have to identify, like, what are we going to build? And then we have to be able to identify like what makes it matter. Right. And for me, like, I want to build a successful marriage. I want to build a family. I want to build a program. Well, that's 3 really, really important things. And then I got to figure out, like, in terms of how we build this, what's going to make this matter? And for me, like, what's the definition of that? And man, I've just tried to operate more in that space, right? Like, I got it in my office now. Like, I just kind of keep it in front of me. And when I get in hard moments, when there's things that maybe don't go as you think they need to go, you can kind of just go back to that. Like, just what makes this matter? Right now, that's a blurry definition of society. I think as a society, we're chasing harder than we've ever chased. But if you look at even literature, not even faith-based literature, I mean, Wall Street Journal, as of a month ago, the satisfaction and the happiness of our country is going south, right? We've never had more money. We never, you know what I mean? Like, there's all kind of things that we're chasing, and there's all these success stories. But I think it's a clear, like, red light right now that, like, we're not satisfied. And for me, like, I just want to be able to get on the back of this and look at this and say, hey, it's not about the dollar sign. It's not about the bank account. It's not about how many houses I have. Was I able to impact people? Was I able to build something that mattered? And people always ask me, like, especially after this year, like, well, why haven't you left yet? Like, why haven't you taken another job yet? And it's like, because we're building something that matters right here. We have a story that now the whole college basketball world knows about, and we're doing it at Furman, and nobody knew about Furman, and now all of a sudden people are in. And so to me, it's like, that's the uniqueness of it. That's the fulfillment of it. And are there jobs where I could make more money? Yes. But is that gonna be in line with what I'm saying my purpose is? And I think that's right there. Like, that's the crux of life, right? Like, are you willing to be consistent with what you feel like your identified purpose is?
Build something that matters. It's such a powerful message that regardless of what someone listening or watching is doing or wants to do, it's a guiding light that everybody can come back to. Build something that matters. And I can't help but thinking, Coach, back to that story you told about the night of the selection show and the team going to Lewis, the barbecue place. And even if you went to the NCAA tournament and didn't beat Virginia and didn't have that moment, 50 years from now, all of you would have still remembered that night at that barbecue joint. And I think that speaks to building something that matters.
And I think we lose sight of that, though, right? Like, we think that we need to stay in the office all night. And we need to tell everybody that we stayed up. We need to tell everybody that we watched 10 Virginia games, right? Because that's the hamster wheel. That's what shows that we're different. That's what but like, what we're really, at the end of the day, like, we're wired to connect, right? Like, that's biologically proven. Okay. we're not wired to see individually how high we can get up and how much we individually can accomplish. Like, we're wired to connect. And I think in that moment, that was a memory. And it's like, hey, my spirit at that point was saying, hey, I want to spend this time with my staff. I don't want to spend this moment watching Virginia film. But conventional wisdom would say, you need to watch Virginia film. And instead, I mean, we talk about it all the time. We're like, man, remember that night in Lewis? And I think, again, what are you chasing? What defines matter, right? Like, I think that's the big thing for me. Like, is it meaningful? Is it relational? Is it inspirational? I think excellence is something that makes things matter, right? Am I willing to try to do something at a standard that's going to show excellence? Is it chase worthy? There's a lot of things we're chasing right now in society, but like, we're not spending a lot of time deciding, is this worthy? Like, is this quenching? And then how impactful is it? Is it going to impact somebody else, or is this just self-serving? Is this just for my career? And I think if I can stay in that kind of that realm, it's a little bit of something that keeps me on track. So it was neat as you go through all that and you're forced to navigate those hard questions. There's probably some people listening that probably think, you know what? Yeah, I've struggled with one of those fancy statements. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be some paragraph. It doesn't have to be better than the other person. But at the end of the day, like, when you wake up in the morning, what's going to energize you? And for me, like, if I can be building, right, which, again, this is more my thinking. I can't necessarily prove this. I think the greatest fulfillment for my personal life is just simple progress. And so that's why the build part is important. I think if I can be attached to something that matters and I'm not in something that's fleeting, and I know that there's going to be things that's going to impact further out, then that gives me the energy to be able to go back to that word we talked about before, endure. I think the endurance comes in play when you're aligned with something that matters. And I think that's key.
Coach, this has been a tremendous pleasure. I have learned so much. We're going to have to do a part 2 sometime and check in and see how things are continuing to go at Furman and in your career and in your life. This has been a great pleasure. There is no question, Bob Richey, you are a tarp puller. As I like to say, you pull the tarp in so many ways, building and creating and enduring so many of the themes and messages that we talked about today. So you're forever part of the Tarp Puller Club, Coach. We'll have to do this again sometime. All right. Thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Absolutely. Anytime. Always welcome to Greenville. If you want to come see us one day, you're always welcome down to Greenville, South Carolina. We'd love to have you.
I am going to take you up on that, Coach. I can't wait to see the team in action and see that thriving campus and all the energy that you're building there.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it, Andrew.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.